let's continue where we left off in the last video and build our loading spinner. And in order to implement the spinner as fast as possible, let's remember that it should appear here in the search results list, but also here in the recipe whenever we click on one of these results here. Okay, so we should have that in mind and build this spinner, this loader, for reusability. Okay, and so let's actually not include it in the search view, but in base.js. Okay, because again, this is not really just for the search, but we're gonna use it later also in the recipes. Okay, and so base here is basically where I put the styles that are reusable and other stuff like these elements. They're also being used and reused across different modules. So let's say export const render the loader. Okay, and now we actually want to pass one argument into this loader, and that is the parent element. Okay, so remember what I mentioned in the beginning, that we will do this loader here for reusability. And so the best way of doing this is to pass in the parent and then say that we want to attach this loader here as a child element of the parent. And so in the case of this list here, we can pass in this parent element here so that the loader will be attached to this. And if it's the recipe, we can then pass in this parent element. All right, so let's create a variable called loader. And then using the template string method that I showed you before. So we're just going to write some HTML here. This one I cannot copy from anywhere, so let's just write it out here. And actually, even inside of JavaScript here, this HTML still gets auto-completed, which is pretty amazing, I think. So we have this div with the loader class, and then in there we have an SVG. And so this is an icon. And then use href, and then in our images, it's the icons.svg, from which we select the icon CW. And that's it. So how does this actually work? So let's take a look at our CSS file here. So that's the CSS file. Let's search for loader. And here we have it. So we style the loader here with this height, this width, and this fill. But the magic really happens here, which is this animation, which is an infinite rotating animation. So that's the animation that I defined here with the keyframes at rule. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. But anyway, we have this animation here, which basically makes this icon rotate 360 degrees. Then we say that we want it to be infinite. And so basically, as long as the element is on the page, it will keep rotating. Okay, and that's as simple as it gets. So really simple stuff here. That's all we need to do here in this situation. Now, where do we actually attach it to? Well, that's the parent that we pass in. So parent, and then again, we use our insert adjacent HTML. Let's take a look again at the documentation here. And so this time around, we're going to put it right after begin here. Okay, so right at the beginning of the parent element. So let's copy this function here. I'm not going to write it out myself. So after begin, and what we want to attach actually is the loader. All right, and that is it, I guess. So moving over to our index.js file here, we now need to edit here, prepare UI for results. So the first thing that we want to do, or actually not so, after clearing the results from the search view, we now want to render our loader. So let's say, and actually we have to import it still. So it is here inside of this base file, right? And so let's actually add the render loader. So these are all named exports. And we could actually have done it with the asterisk import here. So basically importing everything at the same time, but I'm keeping it like this because later we are actually going to add some stuff here that we're maybe not going to use here. And so we don't have to expose it to this global index.js file. Anyway, we can now use render loader here. And all we have to do now is to pass in the parent element. And the parent element where we want this to be is actually this results. Because the results list is an unordered list and we don't want the div inside of that. So this is only for li elements. And so let's actually attach it here in this div. So it is called results, and we need to then add it here into, of course, into this elements. So search document.query selector Okay, let's copy out this one. So elements dot search res. So this renders the loader. Okay, close this one up and let's check it out. And here we go. So here it is. And it keeps rotating and rotating and rotating, waiting for the data to come back. And here we go. So here is our data, but the spinner is of course still rotating here. So that's not ideal. And so let's get actually rid of it. Okay, but let me just inspect it here for you to see it. So that's the icon that we included, and with the, with the infinite rotating animation here. So that's our spinner. Now we also need a method to get rid of it, right? So let's get back to our base.js and create the clear loader. And this time around, we don't need to specify the parent. All we need to do is to select the loader. Now, right now, we cannot really select it like we did here in the elements. And that's because by the time that this code runs, the loader is actually not yet on the page. And so we cannot select anything that is not yet there. So what we need to do here is to do the document.query selector right here. So const loader document.query selector and then the class. Now, it really bothers me to hard code this class into this query selector here now. I really want all of these classes like to be in a central place. So just like we did here. So this is a lot cleaner. And in order to achieve the same thing, we will actually create a new object like this. Element strings this time around. So I'm going to call this one loader, and it has the class name of loader, as we already know. Okay, so down here we now can say element strings dot loader, and the same thing actually up here. So if we were ever to change now the loader name in the CSS for some reason, then all we had to do would be to come here to this element, change it here, and then it would work automatically here in both of these methods, instead of being hard-coded down here and also here in the render method. So maybe you think that's a bit overkill, that's not really necessary, but I like to keep things like that because I'm always looking for usability and maintainability. Because that's something really important in all coding, not just JavaScript, but also CSS and whatever really you're writing. Okay, so in here, we now selected the loader element. Now let's test if it exists so that we can then delete it. Okay, and actually this here is not ready yet because we still need to add the dot. So let's do that using a template string. So dot and then this part. All right, and we cannot add the dot in here because then the dot would also be here in the class name and we don't want that. So this really has to be just a class name, and then we add the dot here for the class selector here right in the query selector. Anyway, if there is a loader, then we want to delete it. And maybe remember from the Budgety app that deleting an element from the DOM is a bit strange. So we have to go up to the parent element. So parent element, and then basically we move down again and remove a child. Okay, so in order to remove an element, we always have to remove a child. And in order to do that, we need to move up to the parent. Okay, and so we pass in the loader again, which is our element, and that should be it. Okay, so what we want to do here is when we render the results, we first want to start by removing the loader. Okay, and again, we need to actually pass it in here or import it. So we want to render and we want to clear the loader. So all of these methods, we want them to be available here. And so let's say clear the loader. And that should do the job. So it already reloaded. Let's search for pizza again. Whoa, what's that? Well, something's wrong here. I mean, it did the functionality, so it added the loader and then it removed it. But I guess something is wrong with the class names. So yeah, of course it's not elements, it's element strings. So here and down here, it should be element strings. Give it a save. Let's try it again. And yeah, here we go. So now it rotates and it disappears as soon as the results come back. So that's exactly the look that we were for. Okay. Now, next up, we have to implement the pagination. So right now we have all of the 30 results all on the same page. And that's not really helpful because it makes the page way too long. And so what we want to do is to have 3 pages with 10 results on each. And so in the next lecture, that's what we're going to take care of. So see you then.